traditional text that we have and how this reflects back in the authenticity of the Book of Mormon. Now, my paper here, I've actually got the entire stories printed out, which you'll have to get a copy if you want to look at it. We're not going to have time to read through it all, but I'm going to kind of provide a summary of the two stories. Nephi and his brothers, of course, are sent back to Jerusalem to get these brass plates. The first couple of attempts fail. It's very interesting, you know, sometimes we look at this, we get this perception of the way that Nephi wants us to see it. For all we know, you know, the first time back, Laban might have gone and taken Laban out to the bar and sat down with him and had a few drinks and then asked him, you know, for the brass plates, and hey, buddy, you know what, can you help us out here? So really, we are going to get a very much a first-person perspective, or a third-person, depending on which part of the story we're dealing with. But after the first couple of attempts fail, including trying to trade all their wealth for the brass plates, we get to the point where Laman and Lemuel are sitting there with a couple of big sticks beating their brothers into submission. And then this angel shows up and tells them that God's going to take care of it all. And then after the angel disappears, Laman and Lemuel begin their normal murmuring cycle, and Nephi says, well, let's go do it. So Nephi heads back on his own, and he finds, of course, Laban laying there on the ground, passed out, chops off his head, takes his armor, and goes and retrieves the brass plates using Laban's identity. We're all probably also familiar with the story of David and Goliath, which is a pretty lengthy thing. We have this Goliath of Gath that gets up every morning when they're in the middle of this war. Comes out in the field of battle and says, if you send somebody out to fight me one-on-one, let's decide this battle until we'll be all set, and whoever wins, they'll win the war. And of course, everybody's terrified of Goliath, who is a giant of a man, clearly very well trained in military arts. All of Israel, they say, is afraid. And David shows up and says, I'll go and face down the Philistine, and ends up going out there and killing him. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to be putting up here on the overhead projection a series of scriptural passages I'm going to talk about, and these are going to be my sequence of parallels, so if we want to go ahead and flip to the next one. The first parallel I want to talk about is the very beginning, and I'm going to say that Nephi's use of this Old Testament storyline begins in 1 Samuel 17, verses 4. In verses 4 to 11 of 1 Samuel 17, talk really about the military might of Goliath. And I'm going to read it. I'm going to be skipping 8, 9, and 10. And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spearhead weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. When Saul and all Israel heard the words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. And then I'm putting that against 1 Nephi chapter 3, verse 31, the last verse of chapter 3 of Nephi. And after the angel had departed, Laman and Lemuel began to murmur, saying, How is it possible the Lord will deliver Laban into our hands? Behold, he is a mighty man. He can command 50, yea, even he can slay 50, then why not us? And for lack of a better term, I'm going to use Nephi's term here throughout the rest of this storyline. This I call the introduction of the mighty man. In the Old Testament story, it's Goliath. In 1 Nephi, it's Laban. Of course, we have the second set of cast members. In the Old Testament, we have Saul and all Israel. In the Book of Mormon, we have Laman and Lemuel. And I think that there's a distinct parallel that Nephi will continue to reinforce later on, is we have this concept of faithless Israel. But we see it in both sides. We have, on one hand, we have the Israelites who are ready to run at the drop of a hat. And here's Laman and Lemuel, who don't really want to be there in the first place, who are convinced that they're all going to end up dead if they continue to pursue this course of action. It's also worthy of note that both of these mighty men are described in terms of military might and prowess. Laban in terms of how many men he commands in the field, Goliath in terms of his equipment, and the fact that it's been pointed out often that this detailed description of his armor and weaponry really just serves to show that he was an experienced warrior. Let's go ahead and continue now. And we're going to move to 1 Samuel 17, verse 32, and 1 Nephi chapter 4, verse 1. And David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine." And then Nephi says, "And it came to pass that I spake unto my brethren, saying, Let us go up again unto Jerusalem, and let us be faithful in keeping the commandments of the Lord. For behold, he is mightier than all the earth, why not mightier than Laban and his 50, or even in his tens of thousands." Now this is the introduction of the hero. David, of course, is the hero in the Old Testament text, while Nephi fills that role in his own account. And in his first appearance, the hero goes to faithless Israel and encourages them in their task, saying that there's nothing to fear, and that the hero is willing to challenge the mighty man. Now, let's go ahead and move forward. Both the heroes then cite as the basis for their faith in their course of action two miracles. David cites two instances from his own life. Nephi cites one from the history of Israel and one from his own life. Both of these miracles are significant from the hero's point of view in both cases. The hero then concludes by remarking that just as God performed these two miracles, God will then deliver them from the hands of the mighty man. So we read now from the Old Testament account. "And David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servants slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God." David said moreover, "The Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine." And Saul said unto David, "Go, and the Lord be with thee." And this is what Nephi says to his brothers. He says, "Therefore let us go up, let us be strong like unto Moses, for he truly spake unto the waters of the Red Sea, and they divided hither and thither, and our fathers came through out of captivity on dry ground, and the armies of the Pharaoh did follow, and were drowned in the waters of the Red Sea. Now behold, you know that this is true, and ye also know that an angel has spoken unto you, wherefore can ye doubt? Let us go up, the Lord is able to deliver us, even as our fathers, and to destroy Laban, even as the Egyptians." Now David's two miracles were being saved from two animals bent on killing him. Likewise, he claims God will treat Goliath as nearly as one of these animals. The two miracles for Nephi are first the destruction of the Egyptians when Moses parts the Red Sea, and second, the visitation of an angel. An angel, among other things, mentions that they will overcome Laban. We come back to the angel in a little bit, as he plays a larger role in explaining why Nephi includes this particular episode. The parting of the sea is also significant, as it serves to show God destroying the enemies of Israel while they are leaving for the promised land. It's coming back to that same Exodus topic that Nephi continues to use over and over again, particularly the further we go into the text. And the other thing that we see is that the brothers have just mentioned that we have Laban and his tens of thousands. This is being subtly compared to by Nephi as the armies of the Egyptians. So now Laban, becomes truly representative, not necessarily the Philistines, but also this concept of the Egyptians, their armies chasing out after them in the wilderness. The idea that Laban is an obstacle that stands between Israel and their promised land, between Nephi and Lehi and their promised land, is quite clear. And just as in the Exodus, Nephi is claiming that God will fight the battles. Now next we have remarks to the effect that the hero comes according to the will of God, and that God delivers into the hero's hands the mighty man. So let's move ahead. I think that this is the last of the previous one, so let's jump one more. Not all this fits, so I want to read through the first Samuel account, and then we'll jump into the first Nephi one. "Then said David to the Philistine," this is 1 Samuel 17, 45-47. "Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hands, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day, and the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with the sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." And then in 1 Nephi, there it is. This is from chapter 4, verses 6, 10 through 12 and 17. And I was led by the Spirit, not knowing beforehand the things which I should do. And it came to pass that I was constrained by the Spirit that I should kill Laban. But I said in my heart, never any time have I shed the blood of man, and I shrunk and would that I might not slay him. And the Spirit said unto me again,